Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Good evening and welcome to our important pay campaign meeting for all members in England. We on tonight's call, we have signers. I can only see one at the moment. We've got Claire on screen, and we have closed captions, which just bear with me, we're trying to enable. They should work, it's a work shortly, but you should be able to enable closed captions by just clicking on the link on your screen. The call will be live streamed on all our social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. And I will now hand you over to our National President, Louise Atkinson.
Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for joining us this evening. So yeah, my name is Louise Atkinson. I am National President of the National Education Union. I'm also a primary school teacher in North Cumbria, and I'm just going to very briefly...
There's no sound.
Sorry, I think we're just having a few technical issues with our British Sign Language interpreters. We'll just try and get that sorted out in the background. I hope everybody else can hear me. I can see a few messages there. Thank you. We'll get our tech team to try and make sure our British Sign Language interpreters can get the sound to them as well. Thank you, Claire. So I'm going to very briefly run through how this call will work, because I'm sure you're all desperate to hear what Mary and Kevin have to tell us this evening. We have got over 20,000 on this Zoom call of our members, and I know that many, many more signed up. So if you know of anybody who is struggling to get in, as you can imagine, it's a technical mission to get everybody into a Zoom call. Please do direct them to our social media, Facebook and Twitter, where we are live streaming this broadcast. They can also access it on our YouTube channel, where there will be a live stream there. And please, I encourage you to share on your social media. It's really important that everybody can hear what Mary and Kevin are going to say to us very shortly. Just to let colleagues know, we won't be answering any questions on the call tonight, but we will be shortly posting some frequently asked questions. However, if you do have a question that's not going to be answered in there, please do pop them into the Q&A function. We will be picking those up, and we will be updating the FAQs very, very shortly in the next day or two. So if you do have a question, put it in the Q&A. It's easier for us to pick it up there. It's fabulous to see everybody from all over the country saying hello to each other in the chat as well. But I would also encourage you, if you do have any questions that aren't answered on the call tonight, do speak to your branch or speak to your rep and your colleagues in your workplace as well. They may be able to help you answer some questions. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Kevin and Mary, who are going to lay out the offer. I will then, after that, go over how you can have your say, and you will get to vote on that. Good evening, Mary and Kevin.
Good evening, Louise.
Thanks very much, Louise. And we're going to go through a PowerPoint. So I'm just going to wait for the PowerPoint to start. But while I'm waiting for that, actually, I'm going to say good evening to all of you and welcome to the meeting. We're going to talk about the pay and funding offer that the government made after your strike action, and then after a period of intensive discussions. And I don't know if this is going to be too disappointing to you, we are going to ask you to reject this offer in the strongest possible way, because it is simply not good enough. We want you to reject it so that we can show the government that NEU members, teachers and leaders will no longer put up with their treatment of the profession. We want you to reject it so that we, Mary and Kevin, can go to the government and say they must do better. We want to say that you won't put up with pay just falling behind and behind, not just prices, but also other professions. We want to say that you will not put up once again with a pay offer that isn't fully funded. At the end of this call, every NEU member in the ballot group, that is teachers in state schools in England, will be sent an individual email which explains the offer in full and with a link where they can cast their vote. That email will arrive at the end of this meeting. The call is mainly for teachers in state schools in England. We are meeting our sixth form college members on a Zoom tomorrow. We're going to arrange a meeting for support staff soon after. We met Wales teachers a few weeks ago. However, people in all those categories feel free to stay on the call now. We are a member-led union. It's your vote that matters, your vote that counts. So in this ballot, please vote. Please encourage your colleagues at school to vote. School reps on this call, hold meetings in your schools, explain the offer. We will send out to everything to you that does explain the offer and encourage them to vote. We do want you to reject, but we want your vote however you vote. So we're going to turn on to the vote, onto the offer itself, and we're going to go to the next slide, and Mary is going to speak. So
there it is in front of you. The pay offer is £1,000 non-consolidated payment to all teachers and leaders this year. For experienced teachers, next year, the pay rise is 4.3% from September. Now, we asked for an inflation-proof pay rise for teachers to begin to restore the value of their pay after 12 years of pay suppression and decline. We were, of course, prepared to negotiate, and we did negotiate hard on this demand. Neither Kevin nor I are unreasonable people. We know that negotiating a deal which we could recommend to you would involve compromise. But the government was not prepared to compromise. After 6 days of intensive talks and a strong desire on behalf of all unions to negotiate properly, the government made this its final offer. The 2023-24 offer from September is half the current rate of inflation. The £1,000 for this year is not even built into pay. It's a one-off payment. This offer doesn't match the offer to teachers in Wales or the offers to teachers in Scotland. It doesn't match the pay rises offered to NHS workers or to firefighters. We negotiated hard to get the government to realise that we aren't miracle workers, and we could not support this offer as a good deal because it is not a good offer. It is not an acceptable offer. Next slide, please.
At the very end of the negotiation process, the government was prepared to talk about the funding of the pay offer. Then they told us that they thought schools could afford 4% of the average 4.5% pay rise with funds that they already have for this April. They would give a new grant to cover just the 0.5%. So the average pay rise is 4.5, experienced teachers, it's 4.3, leaders, it's 4.3, a bit more for beginner teachers, making an average of 4.5. They say that schools can already cover the 4%. But when we've spoken to our head teacher members, they say that's just not true. It might be nearly true at a sort of average level across all schools, although we doubt it there, but it is certainly not true at an individual school level. Individual schools get different amounts, different increases from the government, depending on where they are on the national funding formula. And we've done an analysis of figures that show that between 50 and 60% of schools will have to make cuts next year in order to make the pay rises. The reason there's a variation in our assessment is it depends on what happens to energy prices. But even if energy prices go right back to where they were before the crisis, we think that 40% of schools will have to make cuts. If they don't fall quickly enough, 60% of schools will have to make cuts in order to fund this. We do think the £1,000 cash this year is likely to be fully funded, but our analysis also shows that 64% of schools will have had to make cuts to afford the pay rises from last September. Now, throughout this dispute, we have been clear with members and clear with government that the question of full funding of pay rises is absolutely crucial. The lack of full funding is a vital reason why you should vote to reject this deal and tell the government to do better. The government did make some offers on non-pay matters. Some of them are okay-ish, but nothing like balancing that. And we'll run through some of them with you now, because no doubt they'll talk about them a lot. So next slide, please.
On Ofsted, at a time when sadly we know just how tragic can be the effects of the current inspection system, and with mounting evidence of the stress, excessive workload caused to leaders and teachers because of the current inspection system, we asked for an independent inquiry into the unintended consequences of inspection on well-being and workload. The DFE, the government, did not agree to this request. The government offer instead is greater clarity on when schools should inspect their next inspection, so that outstanding schools know which year the inspectors are scheduled to come, and a review of the complaints process which schools can make if they feel they haven't been fairly treated by the inspectors. But that review had already been announced by Ofsted. It is not a result of our negotiations over the last 6 days. Next slide, please.
We pressed for everything we could to improve this offer. And on pay progression, we asked that the government should guarantee automatic pay progression up the main pay spine and into upper pay spine. We made a concession. We said it's not that it would be automatic unless the head teacher had put a member on a formal capability procedure. We asked that there should be no application process to cross the threshold, because that we know there is a pay suppression, particularly in some primary schools. The government made an offer. They would end the requirement in the document for PRP. However, schools which wish to would retain PRP. They'd still be able to do that. And there was no movement whatsoever from the government on the threshold question. Next slide, please.
We argued strongly that there should be statutory guidance for teachers and leaders in particular, that makes it absolutely clear that there are workload intensive tasks which are essentially useless and which do not raise standards, nor are they any sort of evidence of effective teaching and learning, such as taking photographs of practical maths. Ministers, however, disagreed. They did not want to constrain heads' autonomy. We argued that many head teachers would welcome this guidance as a protection against Ofsted inspectors' latest fads, but the government was not prepared to move. Next slide, please.
We asked the government to create a requirement for every school to have a work-life balance policy, which required school leaders to time cost any new initiative. We asked that the government should do this at a national level as well, but that school leaders should time cost any new initiative with school reps. And if it was to be adopted, to identify compensatory reductions in time elsewhere. But the government was absolutely unwilling to do this. They said it was unreasonable for heads to be expected to sit down and talk with school reps about these issues. And so they said no to that as well. Next slide, please.
We also got the creation of a workload task force. The aims are to achieve a 5-hour target reduction in teacher and leader workload. The target to be measured annually with a baseline from the Working Lives of Teachers study. And the membership to be equally government and trade union membership, with recommendations made to the Secretary of State, Ministers and General Secretaries. We were prepared to be part of this task force, but we argued strongly that without a change to Ofsted or the statutory guidance, or more money for lower class sizes, or increased PPA time, then this task force will have an uphill task.
Next slide, please. We also just want to say to people, we're saying some comments. The whole point of what we're saying to you today is that this offer is not good enough. We want you to reject it so that we say to the government, they have to do better. Our campaign is continuing. Our campaign is intended to get the government to change, and we think we can do that, but we have to go through this stage. We're asking all our members to reject this pay offer. We asked them, though, for anything that they would give us that we could bring to you, but to compensate for the lack of pay if they weren't going to go as far as we wanted them to on the pay. So we asked them, for example, to reinstate pay portability, that if you have reached upper spine 2 in one school, that another school has to at least pay you that much. They refused to put that in. We asked that the pay spine points, which are advisory, should be made compulsory for schools, and they refused to do that as well. Next slide, please.
The government made some other offers. I'll just go through them quickly. One is to align the school teachers review body process with school budget cycle to make it easier for school to plan. So that's the school teachers compare conditions evidence, which makes a proposition of the pay award, which the government has to accept, may reject it. And they offered to align the SDRP process so that the pay award didn't come out on the last day of term. They agreed to reiterate the importance in the school teachers' pay and condition documents that teachers should get lunchtime and breaks, and to reiterate the importance of rarely cover, that teachers should not routinely cover during their working day. And there was also a commitment to review the complaints procedure for parents. If parents made a complaint, that would not automatically trigger an Ofsted inspection. All these things are worthwhile in themselves as far as they go. But we were strongly of the belief that it comes to something when teacher stress and workload is so bad that the right of teachers to take breaks and to take their lunchtime and not to have their non-contact periods taken in cover, we think it comes to something when those things have to be restated. We are also highly dubious that the guidance on rarely cover will change the lived reality in too many schools, which do not have the funding and or cannot get supply teachers, and therefore resort to teachers covering regularly because they don't have the funding, or they can't get supply teachers, or they don't have the funding for supply teachers. Next slide, please.
At the 11th hour, we started negotiation a week last Friday. We finished the talks at 11 p.m. last Thursday, 6 long days. At the 11th hour, at the very end of that, the government made this offer, which we think is a very poor offer. But they also said it would only crystallize if all union executives agreed to put this offer to members without saying reject it. But we can't do that. We think we're a democratic organization. Our executive says, and we agree with them, that we should reject these conditions. We think it's outrageous of them to think that a union has to abide by their conditions. They've made the offer. We're putting it to you. We want to know what you think about it. We will abide by the result of what you think about it. But we say to you, you should reject it. We should go back to government and we say we need more than this. Pay rises need to be higher. They need to be fully funded. There need to be real moves on workload, including on Ofsted. So we're asking for an overwhelming rejection of it. We want to go through with you some of the data that we showed to government about what's happened to pay. And so we'll move on to the last phase of the meeting doing that. So next slide, please.
So we put together a pack of evidence which we presented to ministers about what's happened to teacher pay. So this first bit of evidence we showed them is the Sunday Times data, and it shows that teachers' pay has declined since 2010 more than train drivers, paramedics, by the private sector average, by nurses, by lecturers. Teachers are at the bottom of that group of workers in terms of real terms pay rises since 2011. And we showed them that data. Can we go to the next slide, please? We also showed them evidence from Public First, which is a centre-right think tank. They did work on the median pay, change in real median pay in the UK from 2010 to 2021. And what that shows is that education workers have the second from bottom rise in median pay, as measured by the Consumer Price Index, below finance, below residential care, below manufacturing, below public administration, below health. Education just marginally comes above social work for the rise in median pay. So the evidence that teachers' pay has declined in real terms and declined in comparison with other professions, both graduate professions, and remember teaching is a postgraduate profession, and non-graduate professions. We gave them this evidence and it's irrefutable, but they did not want to engage with it. Next slide, please.
We also showed them the graphs that we made here, comparing teacher pay growth in England with Scotland and Wales. The lines here, the blue line is Scottish teachers, the red line is Wales teachers, and that diverges after pay was devolved to Wales. The black line, the line at the very bottom, is teachers in England. We told them that our members, teachers in England, were taking these pay rises as an insult, that they're being treated worse than their colleagues in devolved nations. We told them parents of children in schools where there are recruitment and retention difficulties would see it as insulting that they weren't offered pay rises in schools in England that were matching the pay rises in Wales and in Scotland. Teachers in Scotland have been offered a 7% pay rise backdated to last year, a 5% pay rise from April, and a 2% further pay rise from January. This widens the gap with England further. Teachers in Wales have been offered 6.5% backdated to September and 5% from this September, in addition to a cash lump sum worth 1.5% of salary. Again, this widens gaps further. So let's move on and look at the effects of those in cash terms. So next slide, please. I'm not expecting you to take all of this in. We'll make it available to your reps. But for the next year, from September of this year, a teacher in their second year teaching in schools in Wales will be paid £33,324. In Scotland, £38,655. But in England, outside London, only £31,680, much less than Wales or Scotland. A teacher in their sixth year in England, if they made normal progression, they might be held back. But if they made normal progression, a teacher in their sixth year would be on 39,974 with this offer. A teacher in Scotland on 48,516, 39,974 in England, 48,516 in Scotland. We think this shows the Westminster government failing to value teachers, failing to value the children in our schools. It will create profound additional recruitment and retention problems, especially in the border areas. It is another reason to reject the offer. Next slide, please.
So, in conclusion, we are putting this offer to all members with a strong recommendation to reject the offer, because the offer will mean that teacher pay, as Kevin has shown, in England falls significantly behind teachers in Wales and Scotland, because the offer is not fully funded, and because this offer will not even begin to solve the teacher recruitment and retention crisis. So we say to you, reject the offer, reject it in huge numbers, and give us the support to go back to the government and say, reopen negotiations, get serious, and let's do a lot better.
Thank you for all your support during this campaign. Support us during this bit. Reject the offer, talk to your colleagues. We can stop sharing the screen, the PowerPoint now. Thank you. Go back to Louise. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, both Mary and Kevin, for that. And, I'm just going to finish up by saying, I know that you negotiated this really hard along with the other education unions, but at the end of the day, we are dealing with a government who just don't understand the realities for us working in education. I personally think the offer is completely insulting, particularly living 10 miles from the Scottish border and seeing those figures Kevin's just shared there about the difference that I can earn 10 miles up the road. But I'm also governor of a local secondary school who is struggling to recruit, and that, as Kevin has said, is just going to make recruitment even harder for us. Just to let colleagues know that are on the call, I'm afraid the chat has broken because there's so many trying to chat, and I believe we have had some issues with our British Sign Language interpreters and people being able to access them. I want to apologise for that. It's a huge call that we've put together this evening at very, very late notice, but I hope you have found it important. It is absolutely right that you get your say on this, but we need to all have our say on this to make it really, really clear, to give Mary and Kevin that really strong voice of all of our membership to go back into negotiations. So you will get your opportunity to vote. It will be the same system that we use for our preliminary ballot. So we want to make it as easy as possible for you. It is vital that we hear your opinions. So straight after this call, as Kevin said, everyone in the ballot group will get an email and you can click on the link there to use your vote. You will also get a text with the question put to you in the text, and you can reply to that text and it will say 1 to reject, 2 to accept. So you can do it either way, whichever's easiest. And you will get reminders, texts and emails. The poll will close at 3 p.m. on Sunday, and we will announce the results of that on Monday. So please watch out for our social media to see the results of that. I want to thank our tech team this evening behind the scenes, and I want to thank the British Sign Language interpreter as well for doing a fabulous job, as they always do. And I want to thank everybody for joining us on the call this evening. Thank you very much. Go away, have a look at it, have a look at our frequently asked questions, check out what it means for you, and please do have your vote. It's really important. Thank you all. Good night.